we're not going to necessarily find that planner or that app right away. How are you on your foundations? Because we're never going to get ahead in business if our foundations are all out of place. So I'm talking obviously things like, rest, right? Or rest, sleep, nutrition, movement.
Hi, Kristy. I'm so excited to have you back on the show.
Hi, Teri. So excited to be back.
Yay. And we're talking about something completely different this time, which is also really fun.
Yeah, kind of on brand too, I guess, if you think about it.
Yeah,
Something
absolutely.
new. Something different.
New. Different, yeah. So let's start with what led you into becoming an ADHD coach? What brought you here?
What brought me here? Well, first it was actually discovering that I thought that I had ADHD. And not even that I thought, it was sort of like a knowing, like when I read this particular article, I was like, I know this is me. I know this is me. But at the time, like back in 2018, back at that time, it was not as widely talked about as it is now these days, right? So it was like, oh no, I'm going to bring this to my doctor. Is she even going to believe me? But I'm so thankful that she was supportive of it. And even just to back it up a little bit further, I think a lot of us mothers who are undiagnosed are in the same boat, is that we're looking to our children first, and then we discover, oh, wait a second. Because this is something that's highly heritable, right? So we see it in grandparents and children and our generation who's being diagnosed. So when I went through that, I was like, well, what do I do? So I went to Google, of course, and Google told me get an ADHD coach. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I didn't even know there was one of these things. So as soon as I saw that too, that was another thing in my gut where it was like an absolute, oh, I think this could really be for me. So, and now here I am.
Now here you are. Perfect. And so what was getting diagnosed like for you? What was the process?
Okay. Yeah. So the process was, first of all, seeing your family doctor here in BC in the Lower Mainland. We had a facility. I don't know if that's the right word, but like a center, a place that specializes in diagnosing adult ADHD adults. And again, at that time, I was lucky because it was only a 3-month wait, and it was also covered under our government MSP. And I know since then, I think the waits are a lot longer. So anyways, you go to that and you do just this huge form, a long questionnaire, which is also very ironic. So I had to fill in paperwork and check boxes and everything else. Although the checking boxes are really good for dopamine. Like, yes. And then you go in and you meet with them. And I think one of the important parts too is that, we can get in the conversation about how, does everybody have a little ADHD? But it's really like the significance of how it affects your life and from when you first saw it. So they also go back to like, where has it shown up in childhood? So you kind of also start there and revisit that part. And then so all together, that's how they do it. So they kind of, I guess, on a score. And I remember she said, "You passed with flying colors." Hey, that's like, oh, yay, go me.
Wow. Yeah, I went through the same place that you went through.
Probably, yeah.
To do it. I think it was the same place. And I did not pass the first time. The first time I got I'm confused about you. I don't really know. So I'm going to pass you on to someone else who will redo it and see, which was very confusing to me. Because to me, I was like, I'm sure I have this. But then when I thought back over the assessment and talking with my husband about it, he was like, were you speaking openly, or were you putting on like your coaching hat and using all your tools that help you? Like, pretend you don't have those tools. Go back like 10 years before you learned all these strategies.
Yes.
And think about your life then. And I was like, oh yeah. And so I realized I was filtering it through a different lens without looking at, if I didn't learn all these coping strategies, and then where would I be? And that was a very different picture. And so when I sat with that was a nurse who I first met with. And then I met with the doctor, and he was like, no, I'm pretty confident you have it.
Yeah.
He's like, but you do have good tools. Like, you have developed some good strategies that help, but no, you have it. And I was like, okay, that's better.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there, because I have done training with you before. And I do think this. I think actually how beneficial it was and how grateful I was going into that, because a lot of people, when they get their diagnosis, they're really in like a really tough place. They're in a really, a place of like deep regret or just all this stuff. But I had done so much mindset work and stuff going into it. Again, that's the word that I always use too, like seeing it through a different lens and having a different understanding of yourself. Because I did that pre-work, a lot of the pre-work, I feel like I started off with a foundation where I was already like, okay, like it just, I think that definitely made a difference too. So
how did getting diagnosed and how did that change your life? Like what happened afterwards?
well, I think the number one thing for me was just a huge validation. It was just the validation for me was probably the most massive thing. And so like I had like an ugly cry, and it wasn't like an ugly cry from regret, although, I have had tiny moments of that too, but it was like this ugly cry of like, oh, like relief, like just relief, validation, understanding, just not feeling like, wow, like this whole 30 plus, where I can't remember what age I was at, like maybe 33, 34, my entire life, like not just adult life, like this goes back to like childhood and being a teen and being in college. I'm like, bang, bang, bang. I'm like, it just all brings this level of understanding. And so for me, like the word I use is like validating. That is how it changed my life. And also it opened up the doors to find community and find other people, because I think that's another huge, huge part when you're connecting with other people who have the same brains, who have had the same experiences, like that's even just another level of like validation, that connection community with others.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring up that community piece, because I remember talking to you after I got diagnosed and I was like, but I have so many friends who have it. You're like, well, we flock to each other. Like
Birds of a feather.
There's a reason you have so many friends with it. And it was, I remember that conversation. I always think back and laugh because I was so adverse to having it because I kept seeing all my friends getting diagnosed. And I thought, well, everyone can't have it. Like that can't be everybody. And then I remember talking with another friend and we were having the same discussion. Like we were talking about, well, all these women that we know are getting diagnosed right now. And like, but I do those things too. Like I'm that way too. Like this can't be everyone. And then we both around the same time had this moment of, wait a minute. Maybe the reason why we think everyone does that is because we also have it. So we both went out and got assessed. Didn't know. We did it independently. Didn't know she was doing it and I was doing it. And then both found out we have it. And then reconvened and we're like
the secret club. Like,
so this is
joined
why,
the secret club together.
Totally. We were like, this is why it seems like everyone around us has it, because we've also just been drawn to people who think the way we think or who have similar habits and stuff. And which segues me into, it seems very common in entrepreneurs. And in this entrepreneurial world, it seems much more prevalent.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there a reason for that, or why do we see so much of this in entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, I think, again, just going back to the birds of a feather flock together, and because you and I, we are in the entrepreneurial space, so there's a lot of people like us. And yes, I mean, I know that when I was doing my coach training, the stat that was given is that if you have ADHD, you're 300% more likely to be an entrepreneur. I've also read as high as 500%. That's just recently, but 300% is the stat that I've read. And I mean, it's honestly, it feels true when you're surrounded by people. It makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense that we kind of lead the entrepreneurial lifestyle, is because we don't necessarily fit the 9 to 5 job, traditional. And I mean, there are strategies to kind of help that. And I think like after the fact, I think I know of some people who are, now that they have the strategies, maybe they're revisiting, having like traditional employment. But on the other side of things for us, like there's so many wonderful, wonderful things. Obviously the novelty, right? We're an interest-based nervous system. So, we get to be creative and we get to change things up and have variety and do things the way that we want to do them. So I think there are definitely a lot of reasons why we all end up in this space together.
It makes so much sense. It does. And I remember back like talking to my husband about it. And at first he was like, no, you don't have it. I do those same things too. Like I also have those habits. I do that. I struggle with that. You don't have ADHD. And then he got diagnosed with ADHD when he
Mm-hmm.
was getting treatment for trauma, and his therapist brought up to him, do you think you might have ADHD? Has that ever occurred to you? And he's like, no, but my wife would say I do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And now he's like fully like acknowledges and knows that he has it and works with it.
And I think his line of work too is also another sort of area where you would see neurodivergent people flourish in, right?
Tons. And that's what he's starting to recognize. And because he's a police officer and he sees that. And now having discussions with other police officers, he's found like a lot of them have been diagnosed with ADHD, or OCD is the other one that's really common in their work, which is interesting to me that there's like those two. Yeah. It's very prevalent. And it makes sense because they get a lot of the variety. Their days are always different. It makes sense to me why they would also gravitate into that line of work.
Yeah. And isn't it a good feeling to have things make sense? Because what's the alternative? When we didn't know this, things didn't make sense. And things were like confusing. Like, what's wrong? Like, that was my default. Like, why can't I like function like a normal adult? Why can't I function like a normal human being that I see around me? And I think there's two things. Yes, there are neurotypical people that exist. And two, there are people who hide it well, right? We mask it very well. We can hide what's going on behind closed doors, which is why there's so many of us, especially women, who were misdiagnosed with, well, not maybe misdiagnosed, but anxiety and depression were presenting because of undiagnosed ADHD, right? So there's a lot of, so having things make sense is just, it's a good feeling.
It is. And it takes away a lot of that shame. At least that's what I found, is that because I think I was one of those people that was masking it really well. Because often when people hear that I have it, they're like, what? Because I'm good at presenting myself as having everything together and everything lined up and being really organized and focused. But they don't see my kitchen day to day. Like they don't see the mess in my house that I can never seem to get on top of.
I hear you. My kitchen. I'm looking at my kitchen right now. Yes.
Oh, what I'm seeing of your house looks beautiful.
I know. I set up the good angle. That's why.
I know. I do the same thing. People are always like, your office is so nice. I'm like, you don't see this side. Like, you don't see all the stuff on my desk I need to deal with. And like all the piles of things on the floor. Like, you just see what I want you to see.
Yes.
But I think that's a huge part of it, right? Like, we just let people see what we want. And then, but I always thought, I was like, well, like what you were saying about why can't I do this? Or why can't I be like this? My question was always, when am I going to be a grown up? Like, when am I going to feel like an adult and feel like I have my home together and to be able to do that? And now I just accept that this is how it is. And I find things that sometimes help. But I also feel like I give myself more grace that, the kitchen's a mess right now. And it is what it is. Like, it is what it is. I'll get to it. Greg will get to it. We'll figure it out. But it's never going to be pristine 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. No such thing as perfection. And I actually said that on the last podcast that I was on you with, like, no such thing as perfection. And like, that's still true this many years later. And I think the word grace is such a good one, grace and compassion. And the most fascinating thing that I find is that the more grace and compassion we have for ourselves, the less we actually kind of struggle overall. Like, you notice that things might be a little bit easier when we give ourselves the grace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, even this morning, I had to message you just before we were supposed to be on to be like, I got something in my eye and I messed up my makeup and all this. But there was like I felt like there was this whole chaotic storm around me. But I was like, Kristy, I could be honest with and tell her what's happening, instead of like, honestly, if you were another guest, I would have been like, I'm just having a technical issue. I'll be on in a minute. I just have to reboot my server or something. So I was like, I could be honest with Kristy and just be like, things are falling apart. Give me a minute. I'll be on.
And I love it. And it's like having that like to laugh about it, just lighthearted, because that was me this morning too. And I was having the same thing. I was like, oh, well, Teri will understand. It's understand. Like, this is so on brand, running around trying to, for me, it was like, oh shoot, I should have dealt with the animals before dropping the kids off. So I'm like running around, getting the hay, getting the chicken feed. And I'm like, I got to get back in. I'm looking at the topic. Yeah. Then I'm like thinking, oh my goodness, please, like, I hope we have this coyote that's kind of terrorizing us, and my dog will bark. So I'm like, oh goodness, I hope the coyote doesn't show up. So, but I'm like, you know what? If it does, that's actually just part of my life. A little bit of the element of chaos to keep things interesting.
Absolutely. And my dogs bark all the time while I'm recording. So it's normal. It's on brand for the show too.
Good.
People are used to
perfect.
it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Now you completely changed business. And since you mentioned you were on the podcast before, but we were talking about headshots back then in your
Yes.
photography
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And so what was that transition like for you from changing your business? And did having ADHD sort of influence you making that change, or was that something that you think would have happened anyway?
Okay. That's a great question. So I mean, what's coming up for me is, well, first of all, being a photographer is a huge, like, ADHD is very prevalent there. I'd say, like, I don't even know what the stat is, but I mean, who knows? 80%? I don't know. Just making that.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, photographers, creatives, yeah, we tend to have ADHD. But a reason why, I think because of the struggles that I had so much behind the scenes, I had so much guilt and shame in my photography business on the areas that were big challenges for me, that it affected me, like, obviously mentally, and it affected me physically. And I think there was just so much of that I needed a break. And I don't think I would have given myself that break had it not been for COVID. So there was, like, kind of that external thing. And going into coaching, and what I say, and it's interesting because I did talk about this on the last podcast, I realized after the fact, it's kind of like with photography. Obviously, it's a passion. It was a passion of mine. I absolutely adored it. I felt like I was good at it. I really loved the photo shoot part of it. And also it was a bit of a default career, if you will, because the story was I got my camera and then took some classes for fun. And then I was asked to take family photos. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And it snowballed from there. It was like, oh, I'm going to have a baby. Can you do my maternity? I've got a wedding. And I'm like, I just jumped right into it. And because I had my three younger ones at the time, my kiddos, it was a perfect thing. So something that I could do to set my own hours. So it was a really great opportunity. And now I feel like with this coaching, like the ADHD stuff that I'm doing, I feel like that was like a chosen, like something that was like intentionally chosen rather than kind of like a default that I like stumbled into. And I'm thankful for that photography and that chapter. So yeah, so I feel like this is something where I actually discovered, and I sat and well, for me, it was like an immediate yes, but just the intention behind it and just feeling like that it was chosen.
Yeah. I love that. And it's interesting for me hearing that, because that's something that I find as a theme as I speak to entrepreneurs on this show, is that often what they end up doing is not the thing that they thought they'd be doing, but they kind of something happens, intervenes in life, and then
Mm-hmm.
they find the thing that they were meant to be doing. And it's kind of like, but before they couldn't see it or they didn't recognize it was there. And it always seems to go that way. And I find that really fascinating that life happens or some kind of life event. Like in your
Mm-hmm.
case, it was COVID, kind of gave you that ability to step away from it. And then they find what they were actually supposed to be doing and the path they're meant to
Yeah.
be on. And it's so interesting to me when that happens.
And it's okay that that path can continue too. So even
Yes.
though you might arrive in this spot, and that's a big thing for me, and I love like the like change is my natural state, and kind of
Mm,
getting rid of that guilt and shame to know that we're allowed to evolve. I mean,
yes.
there comes a time where it's like you don't want to be like a ping pong match where you're here, there, and everywhere, but also give yourself permission that even though you feel like you arrived at the thing you do, that's still allowed to evolve over time, right?
Yes.
So I love.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's such an important message for people, because I know I've had 3 distinct careers in my life and kind of like a sub career. Like I feel like the podcast coaching and stuff I'm doing now is kind of like
Mhm.
not a
Yeah,
complete divergence, but kind of like a subset of what I've been doing.
yeah.
And yeah, and I love that we're allowed to change, we're allowed to evolve and move on to new things. Although I will
Hmm.
say I do miss your photography, because you are the most amazing photographer. You were my favorite one I ever worked with. And for those listening, the photo of me on the cover of the podcast is one of Kristy's photos. So
Thank
that's
you.
her
I
work.
appreciate that. And even when I see your photos the most, but I see a lot of photos around still. And it just gives me that little ping of like, oh, like just that chapter. It warms my heart to see my work. And I'm like, I enjoy seeing it. And part of
Yeah.
me does miss it, but I've been asked a lot if I'm going to go back into it. And I just feel like that at this point in my life, that chapter is closed. But hey,
Yeah.
right? Things can always bring back things in the future, right? But at this point, it feels good having that kind of closed for the time being.
Absolutely. And it's, and I get that. People ask me all the time if I'd go back to theater, if I ever miss it, or if I want to get on stage again. And I'm like, well, I don't. Like, I don't see that opening up again. I feel the same way. It's closed. I'm not going to go back to it. But I also see how it feeds into what I do today and speaking and the work that I do. I bring a lot of my theater skills into it. Even in hypnotherapy, I'm bringing a lot of my theatrics into it. Do you find that past experience is like that you're pulling experience from your photography business into what you do today? Or are they just completely separate?
No, all of my, I've had other businesses too, all of my businesses and all of my careers, like all of my jobs, right? Everything has, and the one ironic thing was that in 2018, I was doing a talk, and that was right before I found out about that. I thought that I had ADHD and went through the whole process. But my talk, that's why I love irony. I love irony and serendipity and synchronicity and all those things. But my talk was called Stepping Stone, and it was talking about releasing that guilt and shame about all the many hats I've worn, because every step I did was leading into the next, and how many things that I'm sort of collecting over the years benefit me now. And if you really sit and look like at all the little things that I've done, yeah, definitely. There's something, always a lesson to be learned. There's always experience to be brought forward that you weave in. Like, just think of it. And when you start thinking of it that way, it's like, it just brings yourself so much more, I don't know. Again, like, it's just that validation and a better understanding of yourself. And I think at the root of it too is just releasing the guilt and shame. And it's like, oh, like, that's really cool that I've done all those things, versus, wow, I really can't stick to anything. Look at me. Like, I just can't stick to one thing. Look, I can't, I'm always changing, like, and now I'm like, no, you know what? Those were my stepping stones, right? And
Yeah.
there can be more. There's allowed to be more.
Yeah. That's a great perspective. Tell us more about the ADHD coaching, and what does a person come to an ADHD coach for? What kind of work do you do with your clients?
So somebody would come because I think kind of at the foundation is they come for something that they think, like a specific problem or a specific challenge, and then you come in and you sort of like open it up and say, okay, now let's look at the whole life. Let's look at everywhere. And it's like, oh, I didn't even think I could bring these things as a topic to coaching, right? So there's that discovery there of what we want to work on. And a lot of it is, I mean, with coaching, it's sort of like a co-creative thing, right? It's a partnership. And so a lot of it is, yeah, I think a lot of it, people are on a path to discovery and finding tools and strategies that work for them. But I also like to work on that mindset. Like, obviously you've heard, I think this whole conversation, I've really been touching on like the grace, the compassion, the guilt, the shame. I think there's just a huge portion of mindset work that is weaved into coaching as well, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
And helping you find
absolutely.
direction in life, like helping you make decisions, helping you get things done, which is
Yeah.
probably, I want to say probably for most of us, if not all of us, is, how many things are getting in our way that are weighing on us every day, right? That to-do list. So
Yeah. Yeah, which is that's amazing. Speaking of to-do lists, what are some strategies or maybe some tools that you could suggest to help us get things done if we're struggling, like with my kitchen, if we're struggling to finish tasks or even start them? Do you have some tips or tools you could share with us?
yeah, I definitely have some tips and tools, but I think I have to go with like my number one hands down thing to get things done is body doubling. So have you heard of body doubling?
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay,
heard
so
of
I
it
feel
first
like
from you, and I love it.
yeah, okay. I feel like, yeah, I've been talking about it since like probably 2019. And I love that it's so like kind of a common word now, like used outside of the neurodivergent community as well. So I think that concept is helpful for anybody, but especially those of us with ADHD. And that for me, hands down, will always be my number one tool. So I kind of was like, when I was kind of away from the scene since I had my whole whirlwind changing,
Yeah.
moving to a farm and stuff, I stepped a little bit away from the ADHD area. Now that I'm kind of back in that arena, I'm thinking, oh, like, does everybody know? I made the assumption like, well, everybody probably knows about it now, but actually there's so many people being diagnosed in the past, few years. I mean, probably days, months, weeks. Like, there's everybody joining the community who might not know about body doubling. So quickly in a nutshell, it's the idea of like having someone there as an anchor, whether it's in person or it's virtually. And we have a co-working, so it's kind of like co-working. So we just set up actually an in-person co-working day, which is the idea of body doubling. and you're sitting alongside somebody, like I said, whether they're there in person or not, or whether you're in a group, like I facilitated group body double session. I have this like sort of thing where like all these little ways, like I call it the body double effect, where it's sort of like little ways that I've kind of worked it into different than traditional. But the idea is like one way you could do it is you get together with somebody like this, like say we're on video and we present like, hey, like this is what we're going to work on. Okay, I'm going to work on this. Okay, let's set off the Pomodoro timer. That would work, 25 minutes. Make sure you take a break in there. But without fail, it is hands down the number one way that I get things done.
Nice.
And because we as humans, we're not meant to work alone. We're not meant to do everything alone. Like we're meant to do things in community. So that's that other component of it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And with body doubling, do you need to be working on the same kind of task, or can you be doing different things? Like what makes it the most effective?
What makes it the most effective is just having that external, like that accountability there. So it really doesn't matter. In my opinion, it absolutely doesn't matter what you're working on. So and here's another misconception. It doesn't have to be just on those like annoying tasks that we avoid. We often avoid things we enjoy too. Like think about our hobbies.
Yeah.
So sometimes I've had body double sessions where it's like crafty sessions. Everybody's working on their craft. They're crocheting. They're catching up on their painting. I was really into like paint by numbers for a while, or like little miniature, like a lot of little things, little hobbies.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too. It can work for stuff that for things that we just don't make time for as well. Reading a book, like maybe you have so many books you want to read. Cleaning is another big one, but that's not to say that maybe someone in business is going to sit there working on writing their blogs, but somebody else might be at home getting their dishes done and doing some cleaning, right? And you can do that in person too. Whereas like, have someone come over to your house and maybe someone's sitting working on their laptop and you're like folding laundry or something. So there's so much versatility there.
Well, I never thought of it for things that we enjoy, but just aren't making time for. And you just gave me a whole bunch of ideas, because I know like one of the things that I really love that I haven't made time for, and I keep thinking I got to get back to it, is watercolor painting. I love it, but I haven't done it in months and months, because I keep putting other things ahead of it and I just haven't been able to prioritize it. But I think if I had someone like, either in my house or even just online while I'm painting, I could make that space for it.
Yeah. Well, sort of that's exactly what I'm wanting to do with this community that I've been, that I am building in the new year. And part of it is going to be a place for connection and creativity and completion, like getting things done. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. Very exciting. I love that. Another way that I've used body doubling, the thing that I find I avoid all the time, and it's not even conscious, I just don't do it, is like if I have to call and make a doctor's appointment, it always gets bumped to the bottom of the list, and I forget. But if I tell my husband I need to call and make these appointments, here's my list, just hang out with me while I call.
Yeah.
He will. Like he'll just hang out either in my office with me, he'll like sit on the chair behind me and read a book, play on his phone, do whatever. But just having his presence in the same space, then I get those calls done, and it's like, then I actually do it and intentionally can make time for it. But if I don't have that, I will put it off for weeks and months, or sometimes I just never do it. I never book the appointment that I need because I put it off for so long. But when I find myself in that pattern, I just ask him, like, I need to make these calls, hang out with me.
Yeah.
While I do them, and then I get it done.
100%. See, that's the way that you can get creative with it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have like an official body double where you're, but that's awesome because there are services out there. There are communities out there. And where can you find it in your household? Like I actually, for my kids too, I've used my kids to kind of help me get stuff done where I'm like, okay, let's do this together. And it's like, okay, now I'm doing it. Little do they know, they're like helping me, get it done too, right? So there's little ways to work it in there.
That just, all of a sudden I just like made a connection too. I realized I really like doing any admin stuff in my business. I hate doing it in my office, like the things I want to put off. But I'll happily sit on my couch and do it on my laptop because Greg will be there watching like the hockey game or doing something. And then it feels so much easier to get done. But if I come into my office to do it, I feel like I don't even want to be in here. Like I don't want to do it. I'll avoid it. So I didn't even realize like that's another way that I'm doing it that I wasn't even consciously aware of doing.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's what I kind of call the body double effect, where it's not like maybe the traditional way, the traditional sense that we think of it, but other little ways where we work at it.
yeah, yeah, because I will literally sit there and do my bookkeeping and my taxes on the couch, where it's like it seems logically like it'd make more sense to do it in my office, where I could be there's no distraction or noise and I could just focus in on it. But I can't do it in here. But I can sit on my couch next to him and do it, and then it gets done. Finally,
And that's the thing is
yeah.
that's the thing is like when you just flow with what works better for you, that's so much easier than the alternative because you're going to exhaust yourself continually trying to force yourself into the way that you think that
Mm-hmm.
it should be done. And meanwhile,
Yeah,
it's still not working and you're exhausted on top of that. But if you can find ways in your life to just alter that and go with what flows better and what feels better with you, then yeah, do that.
yeah, yeah. It makes so much sense. I love it. I love it. And yeah, and we have our body doubling date on Wednesday, where
Yeah,
I'm going to work on my new website.
I'm
Get some
excited.
headway. Yeah. And something else that I love that you talked about, this was recently, we're at an event together and you were talking about making things sparkly again. And
Yeah.
that was huge. Can you share that with us as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, great for entrepreneurs, but anybody. And so, like, I think
Mhm.
about just touch a little bit on more on entrepreneurs is that if we think about
Yeah.
teams, so for those of us with ADHD, if we have teams, that's when we really need to look at systems and structures and outsourcing and delegating. But on our personal stuff in business and personal life, one of the
Mm.
strategies is re-sparkleize. And that was a term,
Re-Sparkle-izing.
yeah,
Yeah.
re-sparkleizing. That's a term that I learned in my ADHD coach training. And that idea is, again, well, just that, like making it re-sparkly, like making it more interesting, making it more novel again. And that's a question I always ask myself and clients. It's like, and how can we make it more interesting? So when we're kind of done with something and we're finding that the thing that we found is not effective anymore, that's okay. What can we do to change it up and spice it up a bit, Re-sparkleize it, if
Yeah.
you will.
I love it so much. And like I was sharing with you at that event, I had found a really good strategy that was working for me for a while for keeping my house clean. And it was so beautiful. I felt so good. I was like, I finally found like the way that I will do this. And I'm an adult now and anyone can drop in on my house anytime and everything is clean uh and fresh. And then it stopped working. And I was like, in my head thinking, well, why isn't this working anymore? I just got to get back to it. I just got to get back to it, but I just can't. I can't seem to get back on track. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just do it? It was working before. And then when you shared that, I was like, light bulbs went off. Or I was like, oh, because it's not sparkly anymore. I just need
Yeah.
to re-sparkleize it. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so
And
cool.
we don't have to put too much pressure, unless we want to in terms of making it like legitimately sparkly. So sometimes it's like,
Mm,
sometimes I need to go out and buy a new notebook and I need to buy some new colorful pens and like, that's totally okay. I don't have to feel
yeah.
shame about that. But also sometimes re-sparkleizing might not have kind of that like sexy, cool visual feeling to it, but it might just be simply like, okay, I need to switch my app. Like it's time for a different, although
Mm,
that could be sparkly feeling too. But you know what I'm saying? It doesn't
yeah.
necessarily have to be something that's outwardly exciting. It might just be something that's subtle and just always shifting and going into things again. It just is like that shame piece, that guilt piece, giving ourselves permission to change, right? And so
Yeah.
feeling like, oh, we've failed at something. Like, here's just yet another thing that I've discovered that now doesn't work for me that I can't stick with. And when you change, just knowing that you can always go back to that because when that thing doesn't work anymore,
Right.
you can pull from the things that have worked before. Now maybe you've had enough of a break. So I do that. There's like different things that I have that I'm like, okay, now I'm in this era. Like, this is what's working for me. And now I discovered something new. And I'm kind of done with this. I'm going to go back. So there's ways that works, right? I'd say it's more stuff that we are like tasks and stuff that are for us. But when you're with
Yeah.
a team, I don't think that necessarily can work as well. I don't think it can work as well when you have
Mm,
people on your team. So that's where having systems in place and different structures are more beneficial. But when it comes to our own personal things in business and in personal life, yeah, feel free to change it as needed.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, like with working with teams, because then you really need a structure. Like you really need to have
Yeah.
that in place for them to follow. So what do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are working with a team and maybe they're getting bored of those systems or they're not like like they as a leader are no longer following it, but how do they keep themselves engaged and interested and so that their team can still follow along? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, how do
Yeah.
you re-sparkleize it if it's in your business and your team needs to stick with the system?
It goes back to body doubling because that's the thing
Mm.
that's going to get me to do the things that I don't want to do. So maybe it's like, oh, I really hate Asana or Trello and I don't like it anymore. But it doesn't make sense to come in next week and be like, we're just going to switch it up. Let's switch everything over. Like, that's not to say that you can't do that, but it's also not going to be productive to be changing all the time.
Mhm.
It just, to me, it doesn't make sense in terms of like resources and time to switch too much in that area. So that's where
Yeah.
body doubling comes in. So it'd be like, well, maybe when I have to catch up on Trello, even though I'm kind of annoyed of it at this point, it's like, I'm going to book in like with body doubling session. And then I'm going to do the thing that I don't want to do.
Nice. Yeah. So simple and effective.
Yeah, it really is,
Yeah.
honestly. And sometimes it feels like a cop out for me to always fall back on that, but I'm genuinely, truly, that is what I use. That is what
Yeah.
works for me. And I believe that's what can work for anybody outside of the neurodivergent community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find I've been I haven't gone for the last few weeks, but over the summer especially, I was going to a co-working space just once a week just to be in the energy of other people working. And those days were so productive for me because everyone around me was working. And it was also a very creative space. It was an interesting space to be in.
Yeah.
But I find like if I go in there, I get so much done just being with people who are working.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
And
It's
I
massive.
love it. Yeah.
It's a massive impact. And I think too, another thing with teams is always just kind of delegating and outsourcing what you don't enjoy doing, where possible, I think too is like, we often go to, okay, I'll use social media as an example. Okay, let's hire someone, let's bring someone in for the team for social media. Let's outsource it to a social media company. But maybe we really love doing social media. Maybe that's our thing. And so let's think outside the box. So as an entrepreneur, maybe it's like, I absolutely hate laundry. And I have done this because we lived in an RV and I used laundry service and that was the best thing. They would pick it up, fold it. It was like the Uber of
Nice.
laundry and it was so good. So it's like maybe instead of, putting the budget towards hiring out something that you actually really do enjoy, you hire something out in your personal life that you loathe, such as laundry or grocery shopping or a cleaning service, right? So there's ways to think outside of the box, and that's where our kind of innovation and creativity come into play as well, right? So thinking outside.
Now I have some questions from my Instagram community. So Lizzie said, speaking from the autistic side, the overwhelm. It's often hard to pace myself. Any tricks I can teach my brain? Yeah, and like the pacing.
I'm kind of wondering, is this business related?
Yeah, I think so. I assume. Yeah, I think
so. The number one thing for overwhelm for me is a brain dump. It's like the act of writing everything out that's on your brain when you're feeling overwhelmed. Because I think that's a really, really great place to start when you're feeling overwhelmed. And another thing is also the environment that you're in. And sometimes we think like, oh, we can handle the clutter. But actually, really, I think a lot of us that think we can, we can't. So are we in a space that's bringing us, like our nervous system into like a very calm, where are we at with that? So are we in a cluttered environment that's causing the visual? I'm just doing it right now because like my place is visually, I have strategies now that I'm so proud that I keep up on things pretty well, but it's not always perfect, right? And that's okay. No such thing as perfection. But yeah, so overwhelm, I think one thing is doing a brain dump, getting everything that's overwhelming you, swirling in your head. And it doesn't just have to be the traditional to-dos, like the tasks. It could be like, here's one on watercolor. I really want to take a watercolor course. Like I should. Oh, I actually did buy the watercolor course. So I should actually open that course and do it that I paid for.
Yeah.
Getting that all down on paper. That's the first step. There's other steps, but I'll just stick to the first step of a brain dump, anything and everything that's going on. And number two for overwhelm is like just being aware of the environment that you're in. Can you bring yourself into an environment that's going to be a little more conducive to a calm nervous system?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. No one ever sees this part of my office, but on like this side is just white wall. Like there's nothing, because I find that if I was looking at what's behind me, like the books and the plants and all the things, that would be way too stimulating for my brain to be able to focus. But I just need like white space behind my computer where I can
Yeah.
it helps a lot of like this. So I get what you're saying about the environment, because that calms me. The clutter on my desk, I need to clean off again. It's gotten a little chaotic, but like I find that having that visual white space where I can just, it allows me to think differently, to be creative. Yeah, that's such a great tip. And then
Yeah.
what about
I hope that kind of answers the question. I don't know, but
yeah, then the second part of her question was about pacing. Like,
yeah.
yeah. And I find like I can relate to that, because I will get so all in on something and I'll be like, go, 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 go. And then I get exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, I have that
So it's
same
sort of like maybe
challenge.
like a hyper focus type thing, like in terms of pace. Is it like
Yeah, I think
too fast pace? Oh my gosh, I really can't go there again. But I'm just, I really want to say body doubling, and I'm not kidding you. I'm not a cop out, because that's where it's like you're taking breaks. Like if you're doing one that's like a facilitated body double, where you're forcing yourself into the 25-minute and taking a 5-minute break, we kind of feel, so you can do this yourself. So it doesn't have to be body doubling, but I'm going to use Pomodoro technique as an example. But really the whole idea is working in little chunks, giving yourself a break to help that pace, because we think that if we can just motor on through and keep going, it's actually not as effective. If we need to take breaks and make sure that we're doing the self-care things. Like, are we taking a break to have a drink of water? Are we getting up and moving our body and stretching? So I think that's why in the long run, if we're not pacing ourselves and we're keeping too focused for a long, significant amount of time, I think in the end, the recovery from that is a lot harder if we don't break it up into chunks, right? So I don't know if that kind of, in terms of pacing, yeah, it's like a Pomodoro technique, making sure you're taking those breaks and making sure you're taking care of yourself on those breaks too.
absolutely. That's a great tip. I find my dogs help with that, because they will, especially my youngest dog, Dutch.
Yes.
If I'm in my office for too long, he will come and he'll start banging on my door and be like, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I want to walk. Because he likes lots of walks. Like, he doesn't have to go for them. Like, he doesn't need to go potty or anything, but he just likes going outside and going for walks. So every couple hours, he'll be like, we're going.
Yeah.
Let's go. And he's relentless. When he decides it's time for a walk, I can't ignore him. He will come in here, he'll paw at me, he'll be like, I want to go outside. Let's go. Let's go. So it's
I love it. Seems like it's a built-in accountability buddy.
Built-in accountability. He's like, we got to go move. You've been sitting here long enough. Let's go move. Yeah.
Love it.
And then the other question that came through Instagram, kind of similar, along the same lines, from LJ. And she said, is there a natural rhythm schedule for neurodivergence to follow? And she says, luteal phase versus follicular phase is one thing. And that was like, I think she's referring back to another guest I had on who talked about like the women's cycles and how to leverage that.
Yeah.
But then she says, but in ADHD, I don't ever know how to say that when people put like the autism and the ADHD. I never know how to say it, but the autism, the ADHD.
ADHD is what I say, but yeah, I know.
ADHD?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think, but I could be wrong on that. That's just how I think.
Yeah.
I think that
makes sense to me. So she says, like, add an ADHD and it's exhausting. So again, about like just the scheduling and the rhythms, like, is there a natural rhythm that we kind of can follow?
I think that's one of the reasons, like, so this is something where this is something where I want to learn more on, where I'm not an expert in, but something that I know is beneficial, and it's the women's cycle. So that's something that's been on my radar to work into my business and my personal life, especially if she's referring to anything to do with like PMDD. That's something that I struggle with too. So and it does impact my life. And so I'm like, how, again, it just going with working with the flow. And yeah, that's something I want to learn. But even when we're talking like a 24-hour rhythm, I think that, I don't know, I believe that not everybody's like a morning person, right? And we don't have to necessarily fit that. And that's one of the benefits of being an entrepreneur, is that, we can sort of shift our life to fit something that's better. Maybe some of us work better on things midday, where I know a lot of people, that's like the midday slump, and they get up in the morning and they can do all their writing and they're important. And I've tried that, and my brain is just not ready for that kind of stuff. I need to be warmed up. I need to do stuff, and I do my better work. I actually do my better work midday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is kind of like different from like what you would think traditionally. Yeah, people say, right? So that's the whole point, right? Screw traditions. Let's just go with what works for you. And maybe in the future, maybe I will be more of a morning person, right? And I can retry that. Again. But yeah. So I'm not expert on working with the rhythms in terms of the, like when she mentioned like the luteal phase and stuff, but that is something that I think I'm super interested to learn about.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be beneficial for all of those of us who are have cycles,
Totally.
right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Check out, if you want to learn more about that, check out Renee Fit. She was on the show last spring. And that's what she does. Like, she teaches women about their cycles and how to track your cycle in terms of like, where's your energy? What are you best at during different times? Are you more creative at this time? Are you more expressive at other times? Is this a time for introspection?
Yes.
And it's amazing. Like, yeah. I'll link it in the show notes. I'll link that episode in the show notes. And then
please do, because that truly is something that's been on my radar for a while now. Something that I want to learn more
fascinating.
about.
It's so fascinating. And I found like talking with her and going through that was, for me, it was like, oh, if I listen to my body, I'm naturally getting these cues anyway.
Yes.
Like when it's time to slow down and be quiet, or when it's time to, like, when I like making more videos, like if I pay attention, I could see the patterns in my business to be like, I like making more videos when I'm like ovulating. So I just plan during that time of the month, like during ovulation, I'm going to make more video content because I feel like, glowy, and I feel more like outward and more extroverted because that's what my body's telling me it wants to do.
So true. I noticed that naturally too with like social media. All of a sudden I'll go through a burst, like I have about a window, and I'm just a burst of like posting, and I'm all like really just like energetic online and stuff. And so, we can just like, if we can really play to that, like how beneficial that is for us.
Yeah. And then you can, she teaches people how you can map out your whole business plan based on that and just follow it along and be like, okay, well, all the video content for my course, I'm going to record on these days, but this is going to be my like visionary week as an entrepreneur where I think about what I want, which is like during a menstrual phase is like more like introspection, think about your bigger vision, get a little quiet. And I'm like, I do that anyway. Like I shut down for 4 days where I'm just like, no, I don't want to see people. I just want to reflect and be on my own and do my thing.
Yeah, and I think even like cool. bigger picture too could be like the seasons, where it doesn't necessarily, I don't mean necessarily seasons like spring, but it kind of lines up with that too, actually, if you think about it, but different seasons. So I think there's so many, like, it's like a clock, like a moving clockwork of different rhythms that are kind of going on at the same time. And it's very fascinating. And I think very important, like it'd be really.
Absolutely. Yeah. And something that I thought, I don't know if have you heard of Rise Sleep? It's an app. So this is helping me right now, and I think this might help LJ in this, is it tracks your sleep for you. So it can track different ways if you have a wearable device, or it'll track by just when you put your phone on your nightstand, it'll start tracking like when you fall asleep, or it can do it by sound. It can like listen and hear when you fall asleep. And so I just have mine set for my nightstand. And it tracks your sleep hours. And then it calculates, like over time, it gets to know you. And it'll be like, okay, you actually need 7.5 hours of sleep is your peak. And this is when you should be going to sleep. This is when you're going to get your big melatonin release in the evening. So this is when you need to start winding down. This is when you should plan to be falling asleep for. So no more reading, like turn off the lights, go to sleep. This is when you should aim to wake up. You should wake up in this window because then you're going to get the best energy for the day. And then it even like maps out your day, and it'll be like, this is where you're going to have some energy lumps. This is the best time for you to exercise. This is where you're going to get like the most benefit out of exercising. This is your highest productivity window. So this is where you should plan things. And it is so cool. It's very accurate. For me, I'm finding it's very accurate. And it'll even like map it over to your calendar and be like, plan your day based on this.
Amazing.
It's really cool.
I love the sound of it. And that just goes to show it's a custom thing. So sometimes when we're asked questions, it's hard to say, well, this might work for me, but it might not work for you exactly that way. So we can always like find something that's a little more tailored, a little more custom to us.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then I've recommended it to a few clients now who are also ADHD. Just by coincidence, I'd recommend it to them anyway, but they're really liking it because they also find it kind of gamifies it a little bit. And they like that. Like they just like that it's like a bit of a game.
Yeah, would certainly love to check that out. Rise app.
Rise Sleep.
Yeah,
Rise Sleep.
Rise Sleep.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on two things. If I can kind of quickly expand on two things that came up. So the word gamification, that is something that for some reason, I just don't super love that particular word, but I love the idea of it. And so gamification for entrepreneurs, right, is it's kind of like an off of like what I call the body double effect, right? So but yeah, how can you gamify things? That can be really huge for a lot of us. And so like I'll use an example. So we're recording this, today on this Monday. And when is this show going to be released?
2 weeks.
Approximately 2 weeks. Okay, perfect. So this is me as an entrepreneur using this as an example of gamification. So by the time that this episode gets posted, I want to make sure that because I'm navigating over my email list. So I want to have that landing page and my email list set up. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to use that because I wanted to have it for today. But I'm like, oh, wait a second, I don't need it for today, but I want to have it for when it's released because you're going to put my links out because they're not working right now. So that is a perfect gamification and external motivation. Right? So I'm building this as an example in this show right now. So gamification. And number 2, just the talk of like sleep and stuff. And that kind of like, I know I mentioned a lot of like the mindset stuff, like the compassion and, releasing the shame. But another huge, massive thing for me, it's like when someone asks about the entrepreneur tools and hacks, I like to go with, okay, we're not going to necessarily find that planner or that app right away. How are you on your foundations? Because we're never going to get ahead in business if our foundations are all out of place. So I'm talking obviously things like, rest, right? Restorative rest, sleep. Nutrition, movement. And again, none of these things have to be necessarily, like movement doesn't have to be traditional. It doesn't necessarily need to go to the gym, right? There's so many things that we can get creative with. So if we're not focusing on those foundations, especially with ADHD, it's just going to make those tools and hacks might not even matter as much because we're in such a struggle, coming from a place of challenge that those things aren't even as effective. Those tools aren't effective, if I'm making sense, right?
Yes.
Right?
It totally makes sense.
The second thing too is the more that we focus on those foundations, those tools also become slightly less necessary. Those strategies can become slightly less necessary when we're operating from like a good foundation, like we're rested, we're nourished, we're connecting. That's another thing, like is connection. Those kind of things. When we're getting that in our lives, everything. It has just such a good ripple effect. It has a ripple effect on our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that you mentioned too, like the day timers and the apps and stuff because I've fallen into that trap where I think that this app is going to change my life. This is what's going to organize me. But what I really need is just to sleep, or I really need, and it can totally relate to what you're saying there. Like that if I take care of those foundational pieces, then those other things don't seem as important anymore, like getting the right app or getting the right day timer in place. And I have found for myself, what I've found is the more simple the tool, the more effective it is for me. So I've tried so many organizational apps and different ways of setting up my to-do list and reminders and all these things. But I find the thing that I always go back to that works the best for me is just the note app on my phone. I just make a checklist. I dump everything in there that I need to do. I check it off when it's done. And then that's it. Then I start another one the next day. And I go back to that. But I always get so excited about like, oh, this new app is going to change everything. And then I just go back to my notes.
Yeah. I mean, if we're chronically overwhelmed, it doesn't make sense to bring in something that's more overwhelming. How can we simplify? How can we bring things back to the most basic, simple way? We don't need to overcomplicate things.
Yeah. Yeah, just keep it really
Which
simple.
I'm telling that to myself because I'm like the queen of making things, everything overcomplicated,
Totally.
right? So we're always forever telling us our own thing too, right?
And I have some rapid fire questions for you if you're down for it.
Yeah.
Favorite book or a book that you want to recommend?
Oh, and I have this. Yeah, I think The Big Leap. The Big Leap.
Well, I haven't read it, but I've heard so much about it.
I have to. I have to give a shout out to Kelly Deals. She was the one who told me about that. And I don't like to repeat. I'm not somebody who watches like shows and books. I can't do it more than once typically. But The Big Leap is one that I have read and listened to multiple times. I love that book.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to move it up my list. I think I need to read that. What is your favorite food?
I'm like looking around my kitchen. You know what? I'm going to go. This isn't maybe a food, but I love anything mint chocolate. Does that count?
Oh yeah, that counts.
I love tacos. I love, a lot of things. I think I struggle with picking favorites because I have a lot of favorites.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to give a shout out to mint chocolate.
Oh, I love mint chocolate. I had mint chocolate just last night. Cadbury. Yeah, Cadbury mint chocolate. What's your biggest pet peeve?
My goodness. I don't know. I'm not, wow, I'm discovering I'm not great at these rapid fire questions. My biggest pet peeve, because I feel like, okay, I don't know if this is my biggest. I think about like when we go on to, okay, here's a pet peeve of mine. In groups, when people come and they say, I don't want to put this out. I have friends and family in this group, so I don't want to say my name, but then they go and give like all these specific details, like my 9-year-old and this is and I'm like, you're just giving it away. That and also when people put stuff out online on social media and Facebook, and then it's shared outside and people are like, this is supposed to be a safe space, a private space. And I'm like, well, please don't do that. Like, I don't condone doing that. That person shouldn't be doing that. And also don't put stuff out online because it's not, Facebook groups are not a safe space. I don't know if this is my biggest pet peeve, but those are two that do bug me when I.
Yes, I agree with those 100%. What are 3 things you would take with you to a deserted island?
I'm just going to go with phone because I was going to think about like a deserted island. So I'm going to go with phone because you can have your books and everything, your audiobooks on there. I'm going to go with art supplies. Like I'll bring a little art case. Nice. And I'll bring some sunscreen because we should, so there's something safe. There's something kind of logical. There's something fun.
You got your bases covered. You're good. Who's a celebrity you would like to have dinner with, dead or alive?
Oh my goodness. Okay. A celebrity, dead or alive? Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh my goodness. I don't know why this is coming up, but I want to say, I don't even know if I want to say this. I for some reason, I want to say Paris Hilton because she's talking about ADHD. And I just feel like that's not somebody that I would necessarily traditionally pick. I feel like I need to think about. I think that I'm discovering that rapid fire questions. I thought I was really good at this because I typically have a quick brain, but I think above a quick brain, I have an overthinking brain.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an interesting thing because I thought that I would be really good with rapid fire questions.
I think you're doing great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I'm going to go with that, but I feel like there's other answers that I would like to know. But I'll just stick with that for right now.
I like the Paris Hilton one because have you seen her? Now I can't think of the name, but she had a reality show, like a recent one.
Yes. About the one where she's getting married or something? Yes. Yeah. Her getting married.
I loved that so much.
Yeah.
And it made me see her in a completely different light. I have so much respect for her.
Yes.
And think she's amazing. So I think that's a great answer.
I loved her biography and just what she's doing. She's kind of out there with the ADHD space right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's a DJ, I think that's really cool. I have
cool.
I have her DJ sets on my phone, and I wouldn't have considered myself like a Paris. That's how it always is for me. It's documentaries, biographies that get me really into things. So yes, I watched that, and that was probably a catalyst. That and her book.
Nice. I think she's a great choice. And the last one, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh gosh, this is so hard too because there's so many that I want to say. I'm gonna go with off the top of my head. The nitty gritty dirt band, Fishing in the Dark, or Maren Morris, My Church, or I would have TLC, Waterfalls, and I really like doing the rap part. So it's just the whole area. Some country, some rap, I do it all.
Everything. Yeah. Perfect. And then Matthew Fornero, who was on this show just before you, he said he wanted to ask you this question. What do you do to properly divide work from personal life and to make sure they don't overlap?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that they do overlap. I don't know if it's maybe because being like a mom and my office is literally in my house. So like logistically and physically speaking, it overlaps.
Yeah.
But so what do I do to separate that? Oh, gosh, like that's like actually a really good question. But I mean, one thing I do is getting out of the house to like physically separate. So it's like going to the coffee shop and then we're going to have a co-work date. I often work in really good times where I go out to the coffee shop. For me, that is a setting that I just work so well in. It's like that I get very overstimulated by sound and noise, but for some reason in that coffee shop atmosphere, that atmosphere works really well for me. So because I work from home and stuff, it's sometimes just changing it up and getting out of the house. How I do separate. Yeah.
That's cool. I like coffee shops too for the same reason. I think it's because it's like that like droning noise. Like it's so background
Yeah.
But it's not invasive noise, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to tell you about this on a total side note. I was talking with a guy at a networking event who he just recently discovered he has ADHD. And he was talking, I forget what it's called, but it's Apple's like virtual reality thing, or you
Like
put
a
the
VR, like the
goggles.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said he likes to set it up as a workspace, but he'll set it up for a coffee shop atmosphere. And so he gets the noise and the surroundings, but he then can like project his computer screen onto it. So he's like sitting in his
Oh
home,
my goodness.
like working away, but has the environment of a coffee shop. And he's like, I get so much done.
I love that. I love that. I mean,
I was
maybe
like,
if
that's so cool.
no one is here, but I feel like if I did that if I was here, I'd have like husband or kids like scaring me, like coming up behind me. Like I could just feel like I would be on edge because I'm like, someone's going to scare me at any moment. I feel
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. For me to be my dogs, I feel like one of my dogs would like jump on me and terrify me. What's a question you would like to pass along to the next guest without knowing who they are?
Okay. Maybe I'm going to. I would like to ask the next question or the next guest. Are they typically like entrepreneurs, would you say? Or I guess,
Usually, yeah.
yeah. So like, I kind of feel like maybe like, what is the legacy you want to leave?
I love that. That's a great question. Yeah. And any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with today?
Final thoughts are I have so many more thoughts, and I was so thankful to be on here talking with you today. But yeah, and talking about it is just making me think more like how much I want to talk. So final thoughts is I want to get my podcast, and I've been so thankful for you because you are such an excellent and amazing podcast coach, full of knowledge. And so yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there as well. That's something that I want to be working on as some of my final thoughts. And
yeah, and get your landing page up so that we can share it, and it'll be in the show notes. So that's your accountability for everyone listening.
See, there's ways to do it.
You'll see it in the show notes.
Use being a guest on a podcast to work in some gamification.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kristy. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.